and wonderful things to share with you today. I turn the floor over to her. Thank you very much, Chantal.
Okay, thanks so much, Michelle. Hi, everyone. Yes, as Michelle has already mentioned, my name is Chantal, and perhaps I've met a few of you in career coaching appointments, and hopefully I'll meet more of you in future career coaching appointments. And as Michelle also mentioned, yes, you are in the resume and cover letter tips webinar. This is all leading up to Get Ready, Get Hired next week. So hopefully we will see you all there as well. Before we get started with the webinar, I would like to give a territorial acknowledgement. We at Kwantlen Polytechnic University respectfully acknowledge that we live, work, and study in a region that overlaps with the unceded, traditional, and ancestral First Nations territories of the Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Kikite, and Coquitlam, and with the lands of the Kwantlen First Nation, which gifted its name to this university. In the cause of reconciliation, we recognize our commitment to address and reduce ongoing systemic colonialism, oppression, and racism that Indigenous peoples continue to experience. Okay, so a little bit about the Career Development Center, very, very briefly. The Career Development Center is made up of career services, volunteer services, cooperative education, actually also employer relations. Up at the top here, there's just a few of the items, a few of the services that we can assist you with. And I also do encourage you to follow us on social media so you can stay up to date on all the exciting activities and events that your Career Development Center hosts. Feel free to scan the QR code there in order to visit us online so you can review more of our services that we offer. Now, we do have a couple more webinars coming up as part of the Get Ready, Get Hired event. So this Thursday, Navigating Career Fairs, all about how to really make sure that you stand out at a career fair. It's coming up this Thursday between 12 to 1 p.m. Hopefully you've registered for that, because if you have and you attend, then of course also qualify for the draw for the webinars. And then after Get Ready, Get Hired, so that's next Thursday, we're doing interviews, the interview webinar from 12 to 1 p.m. And same idea, you can get your name put into our draw. So please do come for that, and I'll be the one delivering those webinars, so you'll be seeing me again. Of course, it's all leading up to the big event, which is Get Ready, Get Hired, our job and volunteer fair. I think up to now we have about 39 employers in attendance. So it's absolutely worth it for you to go and have a chat with some of these employers, just get an understanding for what it is they're hiring for and what it is they do. And it's great practice, isn't it? Okay, so here's the agenda. Not surprisingly, resumes and cover letters. Basically, that's what we're going to be covering today. We're going to start off with 10 tips to help get you that interview. So things like length, consistency, the XYZ format when you're describing what you did in your previous positions. And then we're going to hop over to cover letters. So we're going to go with 5 tips there for cover letters that can help set you apart. And we're going to ask the question, are they always even read? Like, are cover letters even read? Now, I always like to kind of invite a bit of a disclaimer when I'm delivering information about resumes. It's not a science, as much as the science majors in here might hate to hear that. It's not a science, really, but there are certainly some actions you can take when you're putting together your resume to increase your chances of getting that interview. And all the tips that I've put together here for you today, they come from years of experience, years of communicating with employers, and also my own experiences in managing the resume review account that we offer to students, where they can submit their resume, submit their cover letter, and we insert some suggested edits and then send it back. So there's a bit of a regular theme that I tend to see in some of these resumes. And I thought, well, this makes sense then to deliver this webinar in the form of a top 10. So this is based on my experience. It's based on what I receive from the resume review account. So it's not science, but it's my science. So hopefully that'll convince you enough. So this is what we're going to cover in the resume top 10. Number one, the need to know basis. Okay, really telling the reader what it is they need to know. We're going to discuss length. What is an appropriate or acceptable or typical length of a resume? Consistency around font style and size and so forth. Two eyes are better than one. Sounds a little bit funny. Two sets of eyes are better than one. I'm also going to encourage you to be the reader. So put yourself in the seat of the manager or the hiring manager or HR, or whoever it is that's receiving those resumes. So imagine being them, and that might help you to determine what you should and shouldn't put on your resume. Use the rule of thirds. I'm gonna explain that, of course, when we get to resume top tip number 6. Quantifying and showing your impact with XYZ format in those skill statements. So the way that you describe what you did in your previous positions. Also, this one might sound a little funny, but it matters, your file name. Making sure how you save your resume matters. References, should we or should we not put them on our resumes? And then finally, we're going to wrap up resumes anyways, with preferred names. So there we go. Let's go ahead and get started. So just a reminder that to mute your mics and leave your cameras turned off. That would be really great if you could do that. And as Michelle already mentioned, this webinar is recorded. Okay, so top 10. Number 1, we're starting with number 1, need to know. So I always like to say this when I'm having a conversation with students and we're not really sure what to put on, what to leave off a resume, because here's the thing is, you might be particularly proud of some of these accomplishments and you want to tell the world about them, and absolutely fair enough. Maybe not on the resume though. It might not be relevant for that particular reader. You could bring it up maybe in the interview, but the goal of a resume is to get you the meeting. So everything that's on that document should be particularly relevant to the role that you're applying for. So everything on your resume should be truth, but not everything should be on your resume. And sometimes it helps to ask yourself this question: will this bit of information, will this particular accomplishment or job, will this detail help get me an interview for that particular role? And if the answer is no, you could probably take it off, right? If you're dipping into too many pages or whatever it might be, you could probably remove that item from your resume in order to really make sure that you're highlighting what's most relevant to the reader. There's also certain items that you really should not be putting on your resume. So personal details such as your marital status, even your home address, your date of birth, passport number, your social insurance number, that is not information that should be on your resume. In addition, photos. I know that it's common for us to have our photos on, to have a profile photo on a LinkedIn account, but that's where we're going to leave it. We don't want to put it on the actual resume itself. Now that you're in post-secondary, you don't need your high school information on your resume as well. Right, so it's kind of up to you if you choose to put that on there, but you certainly don't need it once you move into a post-secondary environment. And then finally, you don't want to overtell them information. So ultra detailed tasks about what you did or what you do in your previous or current positions is really not necessary, right? So everything that's on your resume should be truth, but not everything should be on your resume. Okay, I'm going to give you a scenario. I'm going to give you a scenario that's particularly relevant to Get Ready, Get Hired. What I mean by that is the Get Ready, Get Hired job and volunteer fair is a little bit more geared towards that part-time job that a student might want to hold while they're studying at KPU. Career Day, which is happening in March, is a little bit more geared towards a professional level job. So it's a little bit more geared towards maybe third or fourth year, or students that are just completing their degrees, or even alumni. Not only, but it's a little bit more geared towards that. So the Get Ready, Get Hired fair is a little bit more geared towards that part-time job that you might want to hold while you're studying at KPU. So with that in mind, you have a student and they're looking for a part-time position at the Get Ready, Get Hired Job and Volunteer Fair next week. They're putting together their resume. They have a ton of experience in education, maybe from their own country, or maybe from the fact that they're a returning student. So they do have a lot of work experience in education and so forth, but they're really looking for a part-time kind of survival job, something to supplement them while they're working, while they're studying at KPU. How many pages should their resume be? Now I'm going to give you about 15 seconds. I want you to think about it. How many pages should this particular student's resume be? I want you to write your answer in the chat. Michelle's going to have a look. We're going to give this about 15 seconds, give you a few seconds to think about that.
Excellent. We have some answers. 2 pages max, 1 to 2 pages, 1 page, 1. So they are flipping between the 1 and 2 pages.
1 and the 2 pages.
Yeah.
Okay. Think that's probably good. I think I'm going to go to the next slide here, and ding, ding, ding. You all did amazingly well. Typically speaking, in Canada, it's between 1 to 2 pages for a standard resume. I'm not talking about a CV. I'm not talking about an academic resume that typically runs more than 3 pages. I'm talking about a standard resume. Now, for this particular student who's looking for a part-time position, I would absolutely recommend stick with 1 page. 1 page is all they would need, but between 1 to 2 pages is certainly the answer. And just to give you a little bit of information, across the world, it does differ. So in the UK, typically it's about 2 pages. Parts of Europe and Australia can be quite long, between 3 to 5 pages, and India can be up to 3 pages. So there you go. It does differ. Great job, everybody. All right, next up, I want to talk a little bit about font size and consistency. So top 10, number 3 is font size and consistency. And I see this a lot in the resumes that are submitted to the resume review account, where there's multiple font styles. The dates are written kind of randomly throughout the page, and there's not a whole lot of consistency to the document. The important thing about consistency is that typically recruiters spend about 6 seconds when they're with the initial viewing of a resume. So about 6 seconds with the initial viewing of a resume. And so in that case, you really do want to make sure that you are giving them a very clear and concise and well-formatted resume that's easy for them to follow. So here's a few tips that I'd like to leave you with. Not leave you with, we're only on number 3, but use 1 font style throughout the entire document, right? Just keep it nice and simple. I have seen up to 2 font styles. I typically just say use 1 font style. You can mess around with that font style by doing things in, all caps or bolded, but for the most part, stick with 1 font style. And keep your headers the same style throughout the entire document. So I just had a little example here. The work history, I chose to write this in Calibri. It's bolded and it's all cap. Just like the next heading, which is education, Calibri, bolded, all cap. Nice and neat and easy to ingest for the reader, right? So the next thing that we do is we put the job title to the far left and we bold it. Similarly, under education, we put the program title to the far left and we bold it. And then there's company name. In place of company name under education is the school name. And then the date is on the right-hand side. Now you can do any kind of format you'd like. You certainly don't have to follow this exact format, as long as each section of the resume shares the same format sequence. in terms of order. So you might choose to have your job title up at the top and then the company name below that. As long as you carry on that consistency within your other headings, that's fine. So program title, and then your school name perhaps below that. And then I just added a few suggested font styles. I put Times New Roman in there. Some people still like to hold on to that one. It is a little bit dated. More traditional companies might be okay with the Times New Roman, but to give it a little bit more of a modern spin, I'm a fan of Calibri myself, which is that first one there. And just a reminder that if you have any questions as we go, please put those questions in the chat with a cue before that, so Michelle knows that it is indeed a question, and I will absolutely get to those questions at the end of today's webinar. All right, number 4, second set of eyes. Please always get feedback on your resume. And I write even with ChatGPT, and I'm going to say particularly with ChatGPT. You got to be careful with that one. Because we might rely a little bit too much on that particular tool. And so I do recommend that either way, whether you use it or not, that you absolutely get feedback on your resume and or your cover letter. And so with that in mind, I do encourage you to use the resume review service. So to find that, simply Google KPU resume review. Very likely you're going to get the first hit will be the one, and you can upload your resume there and get that reviewed. It's typically reviewed by myself. I don't actually make any changes to your document, but I do insert some comments with some suggested edits, ways that I think you might be able to improve the document, and then I send it back to you. Feel free to scan that QR code if you want to just have a quick look of what that might look like. Top 5, number 5, be the reader. So put yourself in the seat of the reader, right? And really help them do their job, help them choose you to bring in for an actual interview. So understand their needs, tell them what's relevant to them, and make the match. One really great way to do this is to, of course, use the job posting as your guide. A standard job posting is typically broken up into 3 main sections, right? So the first section is information about the company. This is who we are. This is how great we are, blah, blah, blah. Now you might refer to that in your cover letter, right? So you'll use that really great information when you're writing your cover letter. The third section, usually a pretty big one, is a detailed list of your expected responsibilities. So things you'll be doing in that particular role. And typically it starts with a great verb of some kind, right? Schedule, da-da-da, reconcile, da-da-da, manage, whatever, right? And so it's giving you some really great information. What you can do in that case is you then determine the skills that are required in order to do those responsibilities. And when you're writing your own bullet points under your previous work experience or your current work experience, you want to try to make that match as much as possible. So just build that connection. If they're looking for someone who's scheduled in the past and you've done it with your previous job or your current position, then make sure that you include that bullet on there. Whereas for a different position, scheduling isn't really a requirement. It's not even something you'd be doing in the role. So you might not even mention it on your resume, right? The third section typically is the qualifications. So here's what we're looking for in the ideal candidate. The qualification section of the job posting, hopefully you address it as much as possible at the top of your resume when you're giving the summary of your skills. So make the match. That's a really quick breakdown of how to do that, but make the match, be the reader, and try to determine what is most relevant for them. Ask yourself the question, will this bit of information on my resume help get me an interview for that particular position? Yes, no, will help you determine if you should even leave it on your resume, or maybe you should bring it up higher. Okay, well, that actually brings me beautifully to my next one. Number 6, the rule of thirds. So when you're looking at your resume, break it up into a third, a third, a third. So 3/3, right? The top third of your resume is the most relevant information because that's more or less where you're going to summarize that you are qualified for the position. You're summarizing the information they are about to read about you, right? So this summarizes your qualifications, your education, your skills and so forth as it pertains to the position you're applying for. So that's the top third. That middle third is proof of the top third, right? So that's the content that proves what you wrote in that top third of your resume. So if in your summary, if you state that you have collaborative team skills through work and volunteer experience, well, I'm going to expect, once I hop down to your work and volunteer experience, I'm going to expect proof of that statement. And then the bottom third of your resume is a combination perhaps of less relevant, maybe a little less interesting information about you. Could be the interest section, which is always a good section to have on your resume, or maybe some older work or volunteer experience that you want them to know about, but isn't as relevant maybe as that middle third. All right, number 7, quantify and impact. So one thing I do typically say to people when I'm helping them review and edit their resume is that numbers really do stand out in a sea of letters. They really, really do. And it also, those numbers really help to kind of prove what it is you're stating you can do, right? So one great way to use this kind of quantifying impact on your resume is to use the XYZ method. Now, we all kind of have our own little opinions around this, but I find it's very clear and easy to think about it this way. So active and relevant verb would be the X. So this is how you're starting the bullet when you're describing what you did in your previous job or what you do in your current position or even in a volunteer role. So you begin it with the X. So that's an active and relevant verb. So it might have been a verb that you borrowed from the job posting under the responsibility section, scheduled or reconciled or collaborated. The Y is the details of that. And then the Z is the results. Okay, so X, Y, and Z. So when you're reading back your bullets on your resume, see if it has those 3 components. Does it have an X, Y, and Z flow to it? Here's an example. So as you can see, I wrote down the job title, I bolded it, and I made it to the left, and it's the first item in this particular section. The date is over there on the right-hand side. The location is listed there as well. And then I added an adverb to it, warmly welcomed between 5 to 10 new clients daily, informing them of services and maintaining efficient flow of food distribution. All right, so this contains the X, the Y, and the Z, right? So the results are there that you maintained an efficient flow of food distribution. There you go, quantify and impact. Number 8, file name. Again, I see this a lot through the resume account, and I've heard about it directly from employers, particularly if you have the opportunity to email a human resources professional or a recruiter or a hiring manager directly. That's a golden opportunity, right? If you don't necessarily have to go through an applicant tracking system and you get the chance and you're invited in rather to email a person directly your resume, and you absolutely must make sure that the file name indicates what the file is. And in this case, it's a resume, right? And so I would suggest your full name, the position title, and what the document actually is. So here's an example, Chantal Rackley _ career coach _ resume. I strongly recommend that you do that. You can also add the company name in there if you'd like, career coach, KPU _ resume. And this will help you to track and to organize all the resumes that you've sent out when you develop a really nice file folder, perhaps on your desktop or in some other device that contains all your resumes. It's a really nice way to keep things organized and to give you a quick reference in terms of where you have submitted your resume. Number 9 of the top 10 is references. References are incredibly important, but they actually should not be on your resume directly. What I would suggest around resumes is to develop a new document with the same header as your resume and your cover letter, and submitted separately. Now, in some cases, they do like to see, some employers like to see your references submitted with your initial application, and that's okay. If that's the case, I would suggest you put it on a separate document with the same header with references written, and typically they ask for 3 references to be submitted. Do not include them on the resume itself unless it was actually written in the posting or told to you directly. Just go ahead and put them directly on your resume, but it's not that's not standard at all. You also don't need to write references available upon request or anything in reference to references on your resume at all. It's just not important information. The references are important, but they know it's expected that you will submit them when it's requested later on, typically after a job interview. All right, next up, we're going to wrap up resumes with a quick survey. And I'm just curious to know your opinion on this. Is this true or false? Your resume must contain your full legal name. So go ahead and write that in the chat. Your resume must contain your full legal name. Is that true or is it false? We'll give that about 10 seconds.
True. We have 1 false. True.
Okay, give it another few seconds.
Doesn't need, so I'm taking that one as a false. Mostly, I would say 90% coming out true. We have 2 falses.
Okay. Michelle, I'm happy they're here today. I'm happy you're all here today. I really, really am, because you might be happy to know this. I don't know, but it's actually false. You do not need to have your legal name on your resume. You can put your preferred name on there. And in some cases, I know that some of you have the same first name as your last name. And so that can be confusing for some people. If you'd like, if you do actually have a preferred name, first name that you go by, you can use that preferred first name and then use your own last name as well. But you actually do not need to have your legal name on your resume. You do,
Chantal,
of course. Yeah.
Could you please clarify a preferred name?
Yeah, and so in some cases, someone might like to have a name that is more relevant to their gender, to the gender that they identify with. And it might also be people might prefer rather to have a name that is shortened. It might be a nickname. It might be a name, just trying to think. Well, legally, my name is Marie, actually, but I go by Chantal, which is my middle name. And so in that case, I put Chantal and then my last name on there. So it really just, by preferred, it actually is exactly that. It's what is the name you prefer to be called? Is it the name you were born with? Is it a different type of nickname? Is it one that you think better represents you? You can use that name.
So Michael may want to be called Mike.
Yes, that's right. And, some people might want to have a name that might be a little bit easier to pronounce for people. Again, that's your choice. I'm not absolutely saying that that's what you should do, but in some cases, that is what I see some students do. They prefer to be called a name that might be a little bit easier to pronounce, but I'm still seeing on their resume that they're putting their given name. And so once we have that conversation and they know that it is absolutely their choice to do that, they can then choose to put the name that they prefer to use here in Canada. Perhaps it's Mike, perhaps it's Kevin, or whatever it might be. And they can put that on their resume if they'd like. So the name on your resume does not need to match the name on your birth certificate or even on your legal documents. However, you do need to use your legal names when you're filling out all those forms that you'll be filling in once you get hired. So all the tax forms and anything else that comes that's recognized as legal documents, you will then need to use your legal name when you're completing those documents. And so you'll just probably have to have a brief conversation with HR just to let them know that this is your preferred name, but these are your actual given names. All right, so I just wanted to wrap it up with a quick visual of a neat and tidy resume that takes into account a lot of the tips that we covered here today. And I have a few red arrows here that I just wanted to draw your attention to. So in those bullets, you can see that some are written in that XYZ kind of format, and some are written more as a task, meaning you were paid to do it. So it's not surprising that you have that on there. We know that you watch children at a summer camp if you were a camp leader, but we want to know, what impact did you have? How did you actually do that? How did you do your job, right? We also know that you probably worked with a team, but we want a little bit more information there, right? So that's why I just put the red arrows there to bring a little bit of attention to that. So we're not writing those bullets in the form of tasks indicating what it is you were paid to do. We want to know more about how you did your job, right? What kind of skills did you use? What kind of impact did you have? So think about the XYZ formatting tip there. Wrapping it up. So again, we discussed the importance of the need to know basis. Not everything, everything that's on your resume should be truth, but not everything should be on your resume. The length of a resume is pretty standard, between 1 to 2 pages. Again, if you're a student looking for that kind of survival job while you're studying here at KPU, 1 page is probably enough when you're applying to those types of jobs. Make sure that your resume is easy to read and easy to follow by maintaining an accurate and consistent font style and size and so forth throughout. Please use the resume review service here at KPU's Career Development Center. We're here for you. That's exactly what that service is for. Empathize with the reader. So put your shoes in, be in the shoes, rather, the hiring manager or the human resources professional, whoever it is that's taking in those resumes, and imagine what it is they need to know about you. Use the rule of thirds to organize your resume really well. Most important, moving down to less important as you get closer to the bottom of the page. Quantify and show impact. So that's with the XYZ format. Remember, numbers really do stand out in a sea of letters. So whenever possible, try to quantify. Try to tell us how much you increased sales by or decreased cost by, or how many customers you served on average daily, or how many people you had reporting to you, as much as possible. And even, guesstimating is okay, right? As long as it's pretty close to what you think was the actual case. Make sure to save it as your name, the position title with, if you want, the company name and what the actual document is. Your references do not need to be on your on your resume rather, and there's in fact no need to mention anything about references on your resume. And if you have a preferred name, if you have a nickname, something that you prefer to use, then use that on your resume instead of your actual legal name. It's okay. You're allowed to do that. Just make sure when you're completing all the legal documents once you get hired that you use your actual legal name. Next up, we're going to hop over to cover letters. And then once we finish this, we are going to open up the chat to see any questions you might have. So my top 5 when it comes to cover letters. Number 1, send one. Number 2, address it to an actual person. Number 3, make sure your formatting is clear and professional. Number 4, make sure you build that connection with the company. Number 5, avoid repeating the resume because they've already read the resume by the time they get to your cover letter. So interesting stat numbers here. I got a few studies that I'll be kind of referencing throughout this part of the webinar. Among companies who actually don't require applicants to submit a cover letter, 73% said that they frequently, it's not an easy word, or always read the cover letters that they do receive. So think about 73% choose to still read cover letters even though require them in the first place. Great way to stand out. Okay, so my tip here, number 1 is send one, unless, and that kind of supports that 73%, unless it specifically lists not to include a cover letter because it will not be read. You see that a lot in a lot of government positions and so forth. But unless they write that, I would strongly suggest that you send a cover letter with your initial application. So 83% of hiring managers reported that cover letters are important in their hiring decisions. Big number, big number. Number 2, human resources. So address it to an actual human if you can. Now, your question might be, how am I supposed to find who I should be addressing it to? Well, one thing you can do is you can actually contact the company. You don't need to contact the company with your full name. Hi there, my name is Chantal Rackley, and I'm really interested. You don't have to go into that. Hi there, I'm interested in applying for the career coach position. I was wondering if you can tell me who I should properly address my cover letter to. Okay. One of 2 things will happen. They will say, no, we're not actually releasing that information, to which case you can say, okay, should I address it to a hiring manager or should I address it to human resources? They'll at least perhaps give you one of those 2 things. But they could very likely say, absolutely, absolutely, I'll tell you who that is. You want to address it to the coordinator of career services, right? And her name is Michelle Matyson. And then you, of course, want to confirm, okay, so Matyson, can you spell that out for me? Yes, I can. And their position is coordinator of career services, correct? Yes, it is. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, so now you have a name. Now, if you imagine, going back to, I don't remember what tip it was, but if you imagine being the reader, being the one that's receiving these applications, and you're going through these cover letters that read, Dear Hiring Manager, Dear Human Resources, to whom it may concern, all of that, and then you see your name, you're going to stop and you're probably going to want to read that one. So I do encourage you to try that. There are other ways you can do it as well. You can use LinkedIn. You can maybe look at the company site to see if they list. And once you perhaps find a name on LinkedIn, you might want to confirm that that is the correct name. You can then call the company, or you can even message that person directly on LinkedIn and ask them if they are the person that's receiving applications. You just want to ensure that you're addressing it to the correct person. All right, so great way to really stand out at the very, very beginning of your cover letter is to address it to an actual human being. You'll also note that I made a mention of pronouns here. So you do want to ensure that you're using the correct pronoun. And if you're not sure what their pronoun is, then feel free to use their full name when you're addressing them at the beginning, Dear Chantal Rackley. Or if you cannot find a name, of course, it's hiring manager, human resources, recruiter, or career services team, or IT team, or whatever it might be. Formatting matters. You want them to want to read the resume. And if it's too long or if it's kind of sloppy looking, you might not get their attention. I recommend that you start with the same header as on your resume and on any other professional document you're going to send, such as your reference sheet, always using the same header. That should really consist of your name, phone number, email address, and if relevant, your LinkedIn account URL. Sometimes it's okay to put your city on there, right? If you're applying to a position and the company is in the same city where you live, feel free to put the city on there, but it's certainly not necessary to put your home address on there. In this example, I have a couple of spaces after my header and everything else is left aligned. So the date is left aligned, and then I have a couple of spaces, and then I have the employer's complete information. I'm going to go back here where we can see the employer's complete information. We have their name, we have their title and the company, the complete address, and the phone number. A job reference number, if applicable, with another line space, and then you're addressing the actual person or the title. I'm a big fan of a 3-paragraph cover letter. It really doesn't need to be much longer than that, but 3 relatively shorter paragraphs is sufficient. It's all you need. Now, if you want to know what to put in those 3 paragraphs, and I suspect you probably do, I am going to share a QR code at the end of this webinar that will bring you to our resume and cover letter toolkit that has all the information in there about what you should be including in each paragraph. And you sign it off with your full name, and I like to repeat the phone number again at the very end. All right, number 4, bridge that connection. So that overlaps with one of our tips from the resume, but it's super crucial that you bridge a connection with yourself, your values, your own mission, and those of the company. So of the particular points that I have here, of the 4 points, 625 recruiters were surveyed, and they were asked, why do you read a cover letter? So the number 1 reason was to provide additional information and context as to why a person is applying for the position. I'm going to say this slowly because some of you might want to kind of jot this down. But of course, remember that this is being recorded, so you can always revisit it. To show the applicant's personality, to give the applicants who don't meet many requirements a chance to pitch their qualifications. And number 4, to check the applicant's communication skills. I once read an article where a recruiter explained why they typically hop over to the cover letter. And you'll notice I said hop over to the cover letter. It's pretty standard, not always, but it's pretty standard that they will start with your resume. And then if they're interested, hop over to the cover letter for one of or more of these 4 reasons. But in this particular article, they described why they hop over to the cover letter in a way that was really great and very clear in terms of understanding that. So what happens when an employer receives multiple applications from very similar candidates, and for those of you that are applying to co-ops and internships, you are perhaps very similar with other applicants in terms of your education, right? You all have very similar education. And so the employer in those situations might want to see other aspects of you outside of school. And they might want to know a little bit more about who you are as a person, what you accomplished, what you're like as a student, and so forth and so on. So in that case, it might be easier for them to hop over to the cover letter to see what sets you apart from the other applicants. Because on the resume, you might look quite similar to other applicants. So that's something to think about. Now, I decided to add a few suggested ChatGPT prompts, in order to help you with this. Now, I do caution you when you're using any AI tool to make sure that you are using it in conjunction with a human being. And if we're using the rule of thirds, I would say about 1/3 ChatGPT or other AI tools and 2/3 human being, okay, in terms of reviewing it and making sure that it actually reads in an authentic voice that's true to you. But here's a few prompts, something that you might want to consider, and some of you might have already, I suspect, have already used it for this purpose. But here's something you could type into ChatGPT. Use the resume I just provided to assist you. As a career expert, describe why the skills I have developed through my work experience and training would be a great match for this job description I posted below. Avoid repeating directly from my resume and keep your response within 100 words. Now you will continue to build on those prompts and build on ChatGPT's results. Here is my resume, paste it. Using my work, volunteer, and education, describe how I will be able to transition well into the job from this job posting. And you paste the job posting there, write it in an authentic voice and within 100 words. And then you can continue to prompt it to until you get results that you can really, really work with. Using your generated response, focus more or less on and go from there. All right, and then number 5, originality. 49% of hiring managers expressed that a strong cover letter can convince them to interview an otherwise weak candidate. Okay, so the cover letter is an excellent opportunity for you to demonstrate your personality and for you to shine a little bit. Yes, use GPT or other AI tools, but always supplement it with yourself, a third to 2/3 of you. Put your own input in there. So in order to do this, you really first need to understand the company and what their needs are and how they work. And it might really help to research a few people that are already working there. And this will give you an idea for what you should focus on when you're drafting that cover letter. And of course, don't forget to always submit it to resume review for another set of eyes. All right, so recap this, send one. The stats are there. They do prefer to read them, and they do, in fact, get a lot of information about you from those documents. Whenever possible, address it to a specific person. That might involve having to do a little bit of digging, putting your investigative hat on, but I believe in you. I think you can do this. Make sure your formatting is very clear and easy to follow, and that there's not too many words on the page. They have to want to read the document. So it has to look, it has to be inviting, essentially. Build that connection with the company, right? So really understand the position, the company, what their needs are, what their concerns might be, and address that in the cover letter. And avoid repeating the resume, because chances are they've started with the resume before they've hopped over and read your cover letter. So please do not repeat. I see this often. Do not copy and paste sections from your resume into your cover letter. It won't get you far. Remember, the purpose of the cover letter is for them to really understand who you are, right? They want to see that really a good understanding for who you might be with that company. All right, and then we have, I'd like to wrap this up with a QR code. Feel free to scan this. This is going to take you over to Career Connection, where you can download the resume and cover letter toolkit to help you draft your killer and winning cover letter and resume. And all the tips and tricks are in there. Suggestions on ways to draft the cover letter and all that exciting stuff is in there as well. So remember, your resume and cover letter won't always work until they do. So please do keep at it. Make sure to use the resume review service. Make an appointment with a career coach so we can review these documents together. That's what we're here for. And also what you're all here for are to win prizes, right? So here's some prizes that we are giving away. Now with the webinars, we're giving away gift cards. So you do need to stay for the duration of the webinar. So we have today's webinar, we have another one on Thursday, Navigating Career Fairs, and then next Thursday, interviews is also the final webinar that we'll be hosting in this series. And all of those take place between 12 and 1 p.m. But you need to attend and you need to stay till the end in order to get your name in the draw for those gift cards. And then at the actual event, Get Ready, Get Hired, there's tuition waivers to be won. There's gift cards from Guildford Town Center. There's Shocks headphones, lots of good stuff. There you go. And then questions. So I think at this point I might stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you, Chantal. This was, I learn more tips and tricks every time I hear you deliver one of these webinars. It's fantastic. Wow, I have a book full of notes that I've been taking. So I hope everybody else has too.
Great.
Yes, thank you very much. So I do have a quick question here. In terms of the sections, this is going back to the resumes, if someone has relevant experience, the experience section comes after the summary, or should we include the education section after the summary?
Okay, that's a really great question. I always like to start the resume. It doesn't matter if your education is more relevant. It doesn't matter if your work experience is more relevant. You always want to start with a brief summary up at the top of your resume. Now, how that summary looks is completely up to you, but it could look one of three ways, essentially. The first way, and I would say for a get ready, get hired type of resume, it's a bulleted list of skills, relevant skills, summary skills up there at the top are probably sufficient. Another option would be to do a short paragraph followed by a short set of technical skills. So perhaps 3 to 4 line paragraph summarizing, your relevant work and education, and then maybe a bulleted list of technical skills. And then the third way that you can do this summary section is just with a summary paragraph, right? So it can really look a little bit different, but no matter what, it's always great to start with that summary section. And then the next section after that depends on what's most relevant to the reader. So in some cases, it might be your work experience that comes first. And in other cases, it might be your education that comes first. But no matter what, you always want to start your resume off with some kind of skill summary.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Next question. Whoops, just said we need to specify on the resume that that this is our preferred name. So
No. Yeah, you do not need to specify that. You can use whatever name you would like to be used, referred to rather by, but you do not have to indicate that this is not your legal name on your resume.
okay, excellent. Thank you. Next question. What is the margins to be used for resume and cover letter? Is narrow margin good?
Yeah, narrow's a little narrow. I'm a fan of kind of a moderate option. So it's not so big. I think typically it's about an inch all around, but I find that to be quite large. So the moderate setting in Microsoft Word is usually quite good.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you. Is it essential to quantify all bullet points in descriptions for experiences? Would it sound unrealistic when we say 30% increase in processing speed? It sounds too obvious that I'm trying to quantify. Wouldn't the recruiter think, what is the source of the quantifying?
Yeah, so no, you certainly do not have to quantify absolutely everything. But if you say that you increase speed by 30%, the focus more is how you did that and not on the 30%, but it will draw their eye to that particular bullet.
Excellent, excellent. Love that. That's so good. Next question. What should we write in our cover letter?
Yeah. Okay. That I'm going to encourage you to download the resume and cover letter toolkit so that you get an idea of of content. But going back to the tips there, the important thing is to connect with the company. So one thing that I suggest people do when they're drafting a cover letter for a particular company is that they visit the actual company website. And when you're reading about the company, who they are and what they do and so forth, there's a kind of flow to the way they write, and they might use certain terminology and so forth. You might want to borrow that kind of flow and borrow some of the terminology that they use. Certainly, you're going to want to use terminology that's specific to your industry as well.
Excellent, excellent. These are excellent questions and excellent answers. I'm loving this. If someone has
Great questions.
are they? Wow. Smart students here. If someone has Dean's Honor Roll for 6 semesters, is it fine to write on there 6 times Dean's Honor Roll on the resume?
Sure, you can. Yeah. Why not?
Excellent. Okay.
That doesn't take a lot of space. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely something that they've worked hard to attain.
Great accomplishment. That's right.
Next question. Should the latest work experience come first on the resume, even if it is the first job I had? Oh, sorry, let me try this again. Should the latest work experience come first on the resume, even if the first job I had is more relevant to the role I'm currently applying for?
Okay, that's a good question. Who asked that question? What's their name?
Kavya.
Kavya?
Yes.
Okay, Kavya, excellent question. So here's a couple of options for you. The first thing is you can have one section dedicated entirely to your work experience. And in that case, your most recent work experience should come first, which of course would result in your more relevant work experience getting pushed down the page a little bit. Hopefully it still lands on page 1 though, and that wouldn't be too much of an issue. However, another option, if you'd like, and I would say that this would be for more professional types of job applications, but what you can do is you can break up your work experience section into 2 sections. The first section would be labeled relevant work experience. And in that section itself, you would have everything written, the most recent relevant work experience going to the oldest in that section. And then below that, you would have other work experience with your most current position, but less relevant, being listed in there as well. Does that make sense?
Excellent. Yes, makes sense to me. Keeping that right up to as close to the top as possible and keeping the reader tuned in that you are relevant to this position. Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Is it okay to mention volunteer experience before work experience, as in education section, volunteer section, work section?
Yeah, I mean, you can. Another option would be to merge those 2 sections as well. So you might have experience, right? You might just name that section experience or work experience. You wouldn't label it employment experience with the rest that I'm about to say. And then you would merge it. So in that case, your volunteer is sprinkled within your work experience, but as an example, let's say you are a food sorter at the food bank, and you've mixed that information in with your paid work experience. You would have something like this: food sorter, bolded, right? In parentheses, volunteer, and then the rest: the date, the organization, and some bullets. And then your paid work experience, cashier, bolded, date, and then company underneath that, and then bullets. So you can merge it with your actual work experience and put volunteer in parentheses for those volunteer positions. Or you can keep the section completely separate, and you can put volunteer before work experience.
Excellent. Excellent.
My
Excellent.
preference
Love
is to mix it. My preference would be to mix it in one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. And that comes to the end of our questions on today's webinar. Thank you again, Chantal, for all the tips and tricks and your expertise in sharing that all with us. It's amazing to have this, and that we have this career center that's free for the students and alumni for their life, basically. Congratulations to all of the attendees still with us. Your name will be entered into the draw on September 22nd for one of the gift cards. I hope that you have learned a lot, taken lots of notes, and if you need any information, please reach out to the Career Center, careers@kpu.ca, or book an appointment with a career coach. We would love to help you on your journey.
Thank you, everyone. Hopefully we'll see you all at the next webinar and at Get Ready, Get Hired next week as well. Thanks for coming.
Beautiful. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.